I am 82 years old, and last week someone told me I looked tired. She didn't say it to hurt me. People rarely do. She said it gently, with that soft concern people use when they believe they are being kind. But kindness has a way of hiding truth. What she meant was simple. You look old. I smiled the way I have smiled for most of my life, politely, quietly, without making anything uncomfortable. The kind of smile that asks for nothing and leaves no trace behind. I have worn that smile for decades. But that night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling that has witnessed more of my life than anyone else, I couldn't let it go. Not the comment, the truth inside it. Because she was right. I do look tired, but not for the reason she thinks. I am not tired because I am old. I am tired because I have spent most of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. Tired of agreeing when I wanted to disagree. Tired of smiling when I wanted to speak. Tired of making myself smaller so other people could feel comfortable around me. At 82, I have finally started noticing something that should have been obvious much earlier. A life can be lived without ever truly belonging to the person living it. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. There are things I have stopped doing, not because a doctor advised me, not because I read them in a book, not because someone wiser told me to, but because continuing them was slowly erasing me. And at this age, I don't have enough time left to keep disappearing. The first thing I stopped doing happened on an ordinary morning, Tuesday. I remember the sound before I remember the moment. The garbage truck. That heavy grinding noise as it moved down the street, stopping at each house, lifting, dropping, moving again. A sound so familiar it usually disappears into the background of the day. But that morning, everything felt sharper, clearer, like something inside me had been waiting. My daughter was standing in the kitchen. Her name is Mira. She had her phone in her hand, showing me pictures. "Look at this one," she said. "It's really nice, clean, safe, and they have people your age there." I didn't need to ask what she was showing me. I already knew. Assisted living. Places where old people go when their lives are slowly being packed away by other people. I took the phone from her and looked. Bright rooms, soft lighting, smiling faces arranged like decorations. Everything looked acceptable. That's the word. Not beautiful, not warm, just acceptable. "They take care of everything," she continued. "You won't have to worry anymore." That sentence stayed in the air longer than it should have. You won't have to worry anymore. For a moment I felt it, that old familiar pull, the instinct to nod, to say, "That sounds nice," to make things easy. I've done that my whole life. When my husband made decisions I didn't agree with, I nodded. When relatives crossed lines they shouldn't have, I smiled. When life asked me what I wanted, I answered with what others needed. Agreement became my language. Silence became my habit. And over time, I forgot what my own voice sounded like. I handed the phone back to her, and for a moment I almost said yes. Not because I wanted to go, but because saying no felt uncomfortable. And I have spent 60 years avoiding discomfort. But something changed in that moment. Maybe it was the quiet in the house. Maybe it was the way my hands felt slightly cold. Or maybe it was the sudden realization that if I said yes, even casually, even politely, I might never come back from it. Because once you start giving your life away in small pieces, people assume they can take the rest. No, I said. It came out softer than I expected, but it was clear. My daughter blinked. What? No, I repeated. I'm not going anywhere. There was a pause, the kind that stretches. But it's better for you, she said. For who? I asked. She didn't answer immediately, because there are some questions people don't expect you to ask. I'm fine here, I said. This is my home. She looked at me the way people look when something doesn't match the version of you they have built in their head. Confused, slightly uncomfortable, almost concerned. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation had already changed shape. And when she left, the house became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. I sat at the dining table, the same table that has been there for more than 40 years. The same one where I have served meals, listened to stories, stayed silent through arguments, and cleaned up after everyone else had gone. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, from something else, something unfamiliar, relief. For the first time in decades, I had said no. Not gently, not indirectly, not in a way that left room for negotiation, just no. And in that moment, I understood something that took me a lifetime to learn. Every time you agree with something you don't believe in, you leave a part of yourself behind. And if you do it long enough, there may not be much left to come back to. That was the first thing I stopped doing. I stopped agreeing, just to keep the peace. And peace, I have learned, is a very expensive thing when it costs you yourself. The second thing I stopped doing did not feel like a decision. It felt like protection. That's how it begins. Not as something harmful, but as something that seems necessary. After my husband died, people told me I was strong. They said it with admiration, with respect, like strength was something to be proud of. And for a while I believed them, because I didn't cry in front of people. I didn't ask for help. I didn't fall apart the way they expected me to. I stayed composed, calm, functional. But what they didn't see was this. I wasn't strong. I was empty. There is a kind of silence that enters a house after someone leaves it forever. Not the normal kind, not peaceful, not comforting. This silence watches you. It follows you from room to room. It sits beside you when you eat, it grows louder at night. At first, I tried to fill it. Phone calls, television, keeping myself busy. But slowly, without even realizing it, I started doing the opposite. I started avoiding people. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just little by little. A neighbor would invite me for tea. "I'm a bit tired today." My sister would call. "Maybe next week." A family gathering. "I don't feel like going out." At first, it felt like relief. No effort, no conversations, no need to pretend I was okay. I told myself I was protecting my energy, that at my age, I had earned the right to be alone. But here is the truth no one tells you. There is a difference between being alone and disappearing. One afternoon, I realized something that frightened me more than anything else had in years. I had gone 3 days without speaking out loud. Not a single word, not even to myself. The only voices I had heard were from the television, and even those didn't feel real. I was sitting in the living room when the phone rang. I looked at it, let it ring once, twice, 3 times. It was my younger sister, Anita. She calls me every week, always has, even when I didn't deserve it. I almost didn't pick up, because I had already decided I didn't have the energy. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the strange feeling of my own thoughts getting too loud. Or maybe it was the smallest part of me that hadn't completely disappeared yet. I answered. "Hello?" "Dee Dee," she said. "I'm coming to get you." "What?" "We're going out. Be ready in 10 minutes. "I'm not." "10 minutes," she repeated, and then she hung up. I sat there for a moment, annoyed, confused, a little irritated. But when she arrived, I went. Not because I wanted to, but because arguing felt like more effort than going. We sat in a small cafe. The coffee was terrible. The chairs were uncomfortable, and the place was louder than I liked. But we stayed there for 2 hours, talking about things that didn't matter. Old memories, random people, the neighbor's dog that won't stop barking. Nothing important, nothing life-changing. And yet, when I came home that evening, something felt different. Not happiness, not excitement, just lighter. Like I had been carrying something I didn't even realize was heavy. That's when I understood. Isolation doesn't feel dangerous at first. It feels easy. It feels safe. It feels like rest. But slowly, quietly, it takes pieces of you. Your voice, your presence, your connection to the world, until one day you are still alive, but no longer living. I thought I was choosing solitude, but I wasn't choosing anything. I was just withdrawing. And the more I withdrew, the easier it became to disappear. I remembered my mother. After my father passed away, she did the same thing. Stopped visiting people. Stopped going out. Stopped being part of anything. She used to say, "I prefer my own company." Maybe she did. Or maybe it just became easier than trying. I watched her become smaller over the years, quieter, less present. And at the time, I told myself it was age. Now I know the truth. It wasn't age. It was disconnection. And I was walking the same path. That day in the cafe didn't change everything, but it changed something. Enough. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to decide, I am not going to disappear while I am still here. So I started doing something very small, very simple, very difficult. I started saying yes. Not to everything, not to things that exhausted me, but to moments. A short walk with my neighbor, a conversation I would normally avoid, sitting outside instead of staying in. Small things, but they mattered, because connection doesn't require a crowd, it just requires presence. Even a little is enough. That was the second thing I stopped doing. I stopped isolating myself just because it felt easier, because easy is not always better. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is the very thing that brings you back to life. The third thing I stopped doing was something I didn't even realize I was doing until it almost cost me more than I was willing to lose. It was winter, the kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, it settles into your bones. I remember because the air felt sharp that morning, clear, unforgiving. I had taken out an old wreath, the same one I had been hanging on my front door for years. A small tradition, something familiar, something that made the house feel lived in. I stepped outside carefully, or at least I thought I did. There was a thin layer of ice, almost invisible. One step, that's all it took. And suddenly I was on the ground, flat on my back, staring up at a sky that looked too distant to belong to me. For a few seconds I didn't move, not because I was hurt badly, but because I was shocked. And then something else came, something stronger than pain, embarrassment. My first thought was not, "Am I okay?" It was, "Did anyone see me?" I lay there completely still, listening, waiting, hoping no one was watching from a window. It's strange, isn't it? Even at this age, we are still more afraid of being seen as weak than we are of actually being hurt. I rolled onto my side, slowly, carefully, pulled myself up using the railing. My hands were shaking, my hip hurt, but I stood. And do you know what I did next? I hung the wreath, as if nothing had happened, as if completing that small task mattered more than what had just taken place. Then I went inside, closed the door, and told no one. Not that day, not the next, not even when the pain started to grow. 2 days later, it was worse, a dull ache that followed me everywhere, a reminder I tried to ignore. A week later, I was limping. Still, I said nothing. It wasn't until my daughter noticed that I finally admitted what had happened. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was uncomfortable. Because the truth was this: I didn't want to seem weak. I didn't want to become that person, the one people worry about, the one people start making decisions for, the one who slowly loses control over her own life. So I stayed silent. But silence doesn't protect you. It only delays what is already real. I have spent most of my life believing something very simple. If you can handle it yourself, you should. Don't complain. Don't ask for help. Don't make things harder for others. Be capable. Be strong. Be manageable. And for many years that belief served me, but at some point it stopped being strength and started becoming denial. Because there is a difference between being strong and pretending you don't have limits. That fall could have been worse, much worse. I could have broken something. I could have been unable to get up. I could have been lying there for hours, waiting. All because I didn't want to ask for help. That's not strength. That's pride. And pride, at this age, can be dangerous. I am not the woman I was at 40 or even 60. Some days my body cooperates. Other days it reminds me very clearly that time has done its work. And there is nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is pretending otherwise. So I made a change, a small one, but an important one. The next time my neighbor offered to carry my groceries, I didn't refuse. I said, "Thank you." It felt strange, unnatural, almost uncomfortable. But it also felt like something else. Relief. Because I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not my strength, not my independence, not my worth. I have already lived enough life to know who I am. I don't need to prove it by suffering silently. That was the third thing I stopped doing. I stopped pretending that I have no limits. Because ignoring your limits does not make you stronger. It only makes the consequences harder to face. And at this stage of life, honesty is far more valuable than pride. The fourth thing I stopped doing didn't come from an accident. It came from a habit, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't look dangerous, but slowly takes your life away, piece by piece. It started with a photograph. I was sitting in my bedroom one Sunday morning. The house was quiet, too quiet. I had made tea, but I hadn't touched it. In my hands was an old photograph from many years ago, a family day. Everyone was there, children laughing, food spread out on a blanket, my husband sitting close beside me. In the picture, everything looked perfect. The light was soft, the smiles were real. The moment looked complete. But as I stared at it, something didn't feel right. Because I remember that day, and it wasn't perfect. I remember being tired. I remember a small argument. I remember wanting to leave early. But the photograph didn't show any of that. It showed something else. Something edited. And suddenly, I realized something uncomfortable. I had been doing the same thing in my mind for years. Remembering the past, not as it was, but as I wished it had been. Softer, warmer, better. And without noticing, I had started comparing everything to it. This used to be better. People used to care more. Life used to feel different. Maybe you've heard people say things like that. Maybe you've said them yourself. But here is the truth I finally understood. The past is not better. It is just finished. It cannot change. It cannot disappoint you anymore. It cannot ask anything from you. That's why it feels safe. But it's also a trap, because while you are living in what was, you stop noticing what is. I sat there for almost an hour, just holding that photograph, lost in something that no longer existed. And by the time I looked up, the morning was gone, completely. Time had passed, and I had not been part of it. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just remembering the past. I was living in it, more than I was living in the present. And the present was quietly slipping away. That realization stayed with me. A few days later, I was walking home with a little girl from the neighborhood. Her name is Ria. She talks a lot about everything. The sky, the road, her school, her friends. Children don't filter their thoughts. They just say what they see, what they feel. And suddenly, she asked me, "Auntie, what's your favorite color right now?" I smiled. "Blue," I said. I have said that my whole life. But she stopped walking, looked up at me and said, "No, not always. Right now." I paused, because I didn't know. Not because I had never had a favorite color, but because I had stopped noticing things like that. I had stopped asking myself simple questions. What do I like? What do I enjoy? What feels different today? I had been living on answers from the past, answers that belonged to a younger version of me, and I had never checked if they were still true. "I don't know," I said. She smiled. "Me neither. It changes." And then she kept walking, as if that answer was perfectly normal. And maybe it is. But for me, it was something else. It was a wake-up call. When did I stop changing? When did I stop noticing? When did I decide that I already knew everything about myself? That evening, I didn't sit with old photographs. I sat outside, on the porch, and I watched the sky, really watched it, the way the colors shifted, slowly, quietly, from light to dark, from one shade to another, colors I couldn't name. And for the first time in a long time, I was not thinking about the past. I was just there, present. The next morning I noticed small things, the taste of tea, the sound of birds, the way sunlight entered the room. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, but real. And that's when I understood something simple, but powerful. You don't lose life all at once. You lose it moment by moment when you stop paying attention. That was the fourth thing I stopped doing. I stopped living in the past, as if it was better than what I have now. Because the truth is, the past is gone, but I am still here. And as long as I am here, there is still something left to live. The fifth thing I stopped doing was the hardest to admit, because it wasn't something that happened to me. It was something I had been doing my entire life. I had made myself useful, not valuable, not fulfilled, not happy, useful. There is a difference. And it took me more than 70 years to understand it. My son visited one afternoon. He brought food. His wife helped set the table. Everything was neat, organized, handled. I stood there, in my own house, feeling like a guest. "You didn't have to do all this," I said. "We wanted to," he replied. And I smiled. Of course I did. That's what I've always done. But inside, something felt wrong. After they ate, I stood up to clean, automatically, without thinking. "I'll do it," I said. "No, Mum," he said gently. "We've got it. We're here to help you." Help. That word stayed with me. Help. Not support, not partnership. Help. As if I had become a responsibility. As if my life had slowly shifted from something I was living to something others were managing. And the uncomfortable truth was this: I had taught them that. For years, I made sure everyone else came first, their needs, their comfort, their schedules, their happiness. I adjusted, I compromised, I stayed quiet. Not because they asked me to, but because I believed that was my role, that love meant giving completely, without limits. And when you do that long enough, people stop asking what you need, because you've shown them you don't need anything. But that's not true. No one is that strong. No one is that empty. The truth is, I had needs. I just never allowed them to exist. I remember a moment from many years ago. My son was still young. He had made a mistake, nothing serious, but my husband wanted to punish him harshly. I disagreed. I knew it was too much, but I said nothing, because keeping peace felt more important than speaking truth, and I watched it happen, silently. That silence stayed, not just in that moment, but in many others, and slowly it shaped my life. I became someone who absorbed everything and expressed nothing. And one day, I looked around and realized something painful. I had disappeared. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. That realization didn't come suddenly. It came quietly. One night, I was in the kitchen, late, washing a cup I didn't need to wash, and I stopped, because a thought came to me, clearer than anything had in years. I didn't know who I was without other people, not truly. I had been someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's support, someone's solution. But who was I, on my own? I didn't have an answer, and that scared me. Because a life can pass while you are busy being everything for everyone else and nothing for yourself. That was the moment everything began to change. I didn't become a different person overnight, but I started doing something new, something uncomfortable, something small. I started choosing myself. Not in big ways, not dramatically, but quietly. When I was tired, I said, "Not today." When I didn't agree, I said, "I don't think so." When I needed rest, I took it. It felt wrong at first, selfish, unfamiliar. But slowly, it started to feel like something else. Right. Because taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. The sixth thing I stopped doing was this. I stopped believing that my value comes from what I do for others. Because I am more than that, and I always was. The seventh thing surprised me. I didn't expect it, didn't think it mattered anymore, but it does, more than people are willing to admit. I'm talking about closeness, connection, touch, not just physical, but emotional. The feeling of being seen, not as a role, but as a person. After my husband passed away, I told myself that part of life was over, that it belonged to the past, that at my age, it didn't matter anymore. But loneliness doesn't disappear with age. If anything, it becomes clearer. There is a man who visits the same cafe I go to sometimes. His name is Arvind. He is kind, simple, honest. We started talking, small things at first. One day, he asked if I would like to have dinner. And for a moment, all the old voices returned. "You're too old. What will people think? This is not for you anymore." But this time, I didn't listen. I said yes. And when he gently touched my hand that evening, something inside me woke up. Not desire, not romance, something deeper, aliveness. The feeling that I was still here, still capable of connection, still allowed to feel. That was the seventh thing I stopped doing. I stopped believing that life had nothing new left for me. And finally, there are two things I am still learning every day. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, and I stopped waiting for the right time, waiting for permission, waiting for life to feel different, because no one is coming. There is no perfect moment. There is only this breath, this evening, this life. I am 82 years old. I have made mistakes, stayed silent when I should have spoken, given too much, lost parts of myself I may never fully recover. But I am still here, and that means something. It means I still have time to live differently. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. If you are listening to me right now, no matter your age, remember this. You don't lose your life all at once. You lose it slowly, every time you ignore yourself. And you get it back the same way, one decision at a time. I am still learning, still trying, still becoming. And maybe that is enough. Because at this age, being alive is not about having everything figured out. It's about finally being real.